Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. Chad Hyams here with another episode in season 3, where we are focused on making a difference. People who make an impact, people who are going to help you make more money, people who are just going to help make a difference in your world. You know, before we get into today's episode, and I'm excited about this one, I want to make sure that you've checked out all of the podcasts that we have in the Win, Make, Give podcast network. For example, have you taken a moment to listen to the 15-point plan? If your energy is low, if your health is sometimes a challenge to you, if happiness is not exactly where you want it to be, check out the 15-point plan where we cover those things on a regular basis for you. If you need something good going on in your world, you know what Clint Swindoll brings you. Tell me something good. And he is going to put that feeling into you every single time you stop and listen to one of his episodes. And then if you're in the real estate industry specifically, we've got Built How. That's right. We've targeted real estate agents by bringing you other successful real estate agents and how they built it. Make sure you're checking out the other podcasts in the network. Folks, we're now here with Win, Make, Give. That's the parent podcast. Why? I'm not really sure. Probably just because it came first. There's nothing parental about any of us on this one. Bob, Ben, myself, we're a disaster. You know it. And yet you still come back and love it. And today, again, I got rid of Bob and I got rid of Ben. That's right. And I brought someone on who's going to bring you some value, and he is going to make you think by the end of this episode. This is a man who knows everything there is to know about death and taxes. Those are the things that are going to happen all the time. When we were talking before, he told me that's his area of expertise and so much more. I want to welcome to the Win, Make, Give a podcast, David York. David, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chad. I really appreciate the chance and look forward to having a great conversation.
Yeah, we love great conversations because, boy, don't we find out some interesting things we weren't planning to even talk about. I don't prep for these in the sense other than I've got a few questions to make sure I want to know, because I want it to be a natural flowing conversation and where our interest goes, which means, David, as our audience knows, I don't do my research on you. I don't sit there and say, hey, I'm going to find out everything and read some really boring bio about David to them. I want you to introduce yourself to our audience. Who should they be prepared to hear from as we get into this together?
Well, I'm an attorney. I'm also a CPA. So any bio of me would be inherently boring. That's not what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about purpose. And I want to talk about the why of wealth and how you actually live with a mindset and a mentality that makes a difference.
A mindset and a mentality that makes a difference. I am a mindset guy. Believe mindset makes all the difference in the world. David, let's start right there. Talk to me. How does mindset make a difference?
So let me tell you, in the genesis of all this for me was an experience I had with a client. So when I started estate planning 25 years ago, I came from a really technical perspective. You know, wealth was all about the what and the how, right? What is your wealth? How do we transfer it? But it wasn't too long before I started to see the problems of inherited wealth, focusing on money, focusing just on resources. And 6 years ago, I was sitting down with a client of mine. She's actually one of the wealthiest women in the United States, is the owner of the Utah Jazz. Her name's Gail Miller. And we were in the middle of working on a trust that would transfer the ownership of the team to a trust that would be designed to keep it in the state of Utah. So I'm not sure where you're at, but out here in Utah, there's not a lot to do. And one of the things we rally around as a state is the Utah Jazz. It's a really important thing to our valley and to our whole state, really. And so we were talking, and I just asked her kind of offhanded. I said, how will it feel to no longer own the Utah Jazz? And she was looking at some of the documents I had prepared. And she said, well, I don't own the Utah Jazz. And it kind of caused me some pause because this is one of the smartest ladies I know. At the time, she's operating over 70 different operating businesses.
Wow.
And $1 billion net worth. And so here I am, the estate planner. So I said, no, actually, you do own the jazz. I want to make sure she knows that, right? And I'll never forget, she stopped what she was doing and she looked back at me and she said, "No, I don't." She said, "I'm a steward of the jazz." And it
Oh,
was really one of the most powerful moments I've ever had, because here's someone who we think is at the top of the pyramid, right? She's achieved ownership of an iconic asset. There's only 30 of them in the world,
sure.
but what I found was she had a different mindset and a different mentality. And one of the things I've come to realize is that if we're not careful, most of what we own actually owns us, right? And yet she had transcended that. She wasn't owned by this asset. And that mindset and mentality allowed her to look at things fundamentally different.
Yeah, I love that. I hope I'm going to say it right. What you just said is the things that we own sometimes end up owning us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Whether it's our business, whether it's the assets that we have. You see, I have a lot of clients, they amass a lot of wealth, a lot of resources. And what they realize is they work for those assets more than those assets work for them, right?
Mm,
Whether it's the second home that you got to go take care of, whether it's the business with 40 employees that draw increasing amounts of time and energy. And a lot of clients are actually burdened by those things because they own them. But imagine actually having access and control of those things without being owned by them. And that's what she demonstrated to me that day.
wow. And that really is probably just a mindset shift. It's not literally a piece of paper that says you don't own it anymore, and yet somehow you still own it. That's just the mindset. And the word she used, I heard in there, and you mentioned it in our very brief conversation before we started recording the episode, was stewardship or
Yeah.
steward
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
Talk to me about that, because that seems to be a word that really resonates with you, David, and kind of goes along with all the things you teach, talk about, and share.
Yeah. And so, that moment, really, I just started to think about what is a steward. And it's actually sent me on this 6-year journey of trying to figure that out and to look for other examples of stewards. But at the end of the day, what I came to realize is this: a steward is someone who is fully invested in something bigger than themselves. So they are all in with their time, with their skill sets and abilities, with their resources, but it's about something more than themselves. And you really compare it to someone who's not invested and there's nothing bigger than themselves, right? And that's a consumer. And really, you see that consumer mentality in the world today. And you see that among so many people, right? I'm not going to invest anything. There's nothing bigger than myself. And then we wonder why there's high rates of unhappiness, lack of vision, lack of uh, perspective in life, really. And it's because of that. And so I think one of the best ways to combat consumerism, one of the things you see in the world today is, what do we do? Well, we need to consume less, or we need to watch that. The opposite of consumerism isn't minimalism. The opposite of consumerism is stewardship. It's about being all in and fully engaged, but it's about something fundamentally bigger than just you.
Well, I'm going to change my title. I'm no longer a co-host of the Win Make Give podcast. I'm going to be a steward of the Win Make Give podcast, because that description of and definition of what you just shared, David, sounds like how we feel about the podcast. It's bigger than us. We're doing it for others. We're here to help other people. And boy, won't it just make it that much easier for someone to replace me and come along as long as they care. They don't have to sit in my chair. They just have to become a steward of the show as well.
Well, and honestly, you've actually hit on a couple of, I think, key elements of stewardship there. When something's bigger than yourself, it gives you a destination, or it gives you a direction, not a destination. And you see this with people, right? They want to establish goals. Well, once I become a millionaire, or once I have 10 employees in a business, or once I'm worth 50 million, then I will have all this stuff, right? It's an if-then mentality.
Yep.
Stewards operate under what I call a because therefore model, right? Because of what is bigger than me, therefore I will fully invest in that. And it's actually very freeing, because they're about a direction that they're going in life, as opposed to a destination that you either arrive at and find that it wasn't all you expected it to be,
Never is it?
or you don't arrive there And then you're constantly striving and it's unmet expectations, right? So it's that different mindset that actually counterintuitively frees you, even though it's bigger than yourself. It's more about where you're going. So everything you do with this podcast, every bit of information you share, that's advancing you in the direction you want to go, which is building and enriching the lives of others.
You know me so well, and we've only known each other for about 14 minutes. All right, so give me some examples of some other stewards out there, and maybe that our audience will be like, "Oh yeah, I get it," or maybe they're types of stewardship, or give me something. I know. Look, I know, and it's coming, and we're going to get it to him at the end. Anybody who goes on a journey for 6 years to learn about something like this, David, puts it in writing, which means there's a book coming, right? So somewhere in that book, there's the cute, catchy little, here are your 4 personality types, or here are the most famous stewards that you'll know in history. Give our audience a little sneak peek of some of that stuff.
Yeah, I actually have the 4 archetypes and the stories in there.
There you go. See, I haven't even read the book and I know what's coming.
No, I'll give you, it's interesting because, it's kind of like slug bug, right? Once you start looking for something, you start to see it places.
It'll be interesting to see how many people just said, what did he just say? Because that means your age. We know your age if you understood what he just said or not. All right.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Jump into it. I love personality types. Give me the 4 types of stewardship.
Well, like I mentioned, so first and foremost, you have those consumers. And unfortunately, it's ubiquitous in culture today, right? It's people who there's no personal investment. There's nothing bigger than themselves.
Yep.
That's why in the United States, the average American inheritance lasts 18 months. So what people can build and grow over the course of their life is on average spent by their children in 18 months. And why is that? It's because by and large with inheritance, we say, I'm going to give you something that costs you nothing. I'm going to give you no meaning or purpose behind that wealth. And then what do? We consume it. And that's true. Even among the high net worth, there's a lot of concern about income inequality, concentration of wealth, those kind of things, and not to go off on that tangent. But in my experience, cash flows, right? It flows from sloth and self-centeredness, and it flows to hard work and creativity and innovation. And unfortunately, that consumer mentality is kind of ubiquitous. Now, on the other hand, what if you have someone who's about something bigger than themselves, right? They see a future, they see the world as they want it to be, but they either lack the willingness to invest, they lack the resources to invest, or quite frankly, they've never actually been asked to invest. Those are what I call the dreamers, right? They see the world, they see all these things that they want to do different, but because of that lack of personal investment, it causes no impact. On the flip side, you have those owners. Those are people, they are all in. And we know these people, right? First to work, last to leave, fully invested, fully engaged. But ultimately, it's not about anything bigger than themselves. So it comes to an end. It's done. That's why 70% of business owners regret selling their business within a year of a sale. Because
they got nothing else to do.
No, then what they didn't realize was that was actually my purpose, right? That position was actually my purpose. There was nothing bigger than themselves. And it just doesn't last. It only goes as long as that person.
And David, that sounds to me like what you were talking about earlier. That's that person who the asset controls them.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And it's not just, when I say owner, it's not just, the business owner, because it can be anything. It can be the stay-at-home mom who was fully invested in the kids, right? It's all about the kids, all about the kids. Then the last one walks out the door, the house is empty, and there's no purpose. Now, I'm not saying don't be fully invested in your kids, but it's got to be about something bigger than just that.
Yeah.
And so that's the danger of ownership. And so I'll give you an example. As I start to look for stewards. In 2019, my wife and I went on took the family to Italy. And one of the things we went to was a winery just outside of Verona, Italy. Beautiful. 5th generation family business, started in 1896. Just incredibly a neat place. And I was talking with the daughter who was running this family business. And I said, what's the secret of a 5-generation family business? And she looked at me and she said, it's one word. and I'm sitting there trying to think what could that word be? Is it family? Is it vision? Is it wine? Like what is it that keeps us together?
Legacy.
Yeah, legacy. That's a great word. Here's what she said. She said passion. But I loved how she described it. She said, it's a beautiful work, but it's also very hard. You have to look up and see the beauty and look down and do the work. And in there, those are those two characteristics. Like for them, the beauty was the transcendence. That was their why. And then their why drove them to be fully invested, put their head down and get the work done to make it happen. So they knew who they were, what they valued, and it was the beauty of this place. And that's why they're going to have a sixth and seventh and eighth generation there. But it's only going to be there because they were all in every day working to enhance that beauty.
Okay. So we got consumers, dreamers, owners. I got to guess the fourth level's got to be our stewards.
Exactly. It's the stewards. And they have a couple of things that really create a different mindset for them. One is that because therefore model, right? They know their because, they know their why, and it drives to engagement. But then the other one, and you mentioned this, right? Stewards know that other people are the key. It's about someone else. And for them, their inner world, their why drives their engagement with the outer world. And that's, again, something that's very different. For most people, the problem is our outer world and where the world tells us where to go, where others say we need to do, the other, all of this outside influence leads to inner confusion. But stewards, they're really grounded. They know what they're about. And then that drives their engagement with the world. And then the other thing, and you actually mentioned it too, right? They're guided by both the present and the future. And the way I like to describe this is that they actually care more about their successors than they do about their success. So for them, a podcast is still going 30 years from now by another steward who's continuing that and helping to impact the lives of others. That's absolute success for them. The owner, it's got to be about them. It's got to be about their name, but then it only lasts as long as they're around.
I love that description right there. Folks, I challenge everybody out there, you're owners. A lot of our audience members are owners of a business of some sort, whether it's a real estate organization or something else that they own, that they have built. You've earned the right to get to that ownership level. Yet that simple flip of the switch that says, this will live beyond me. And that's what's actually going to prove to me that it is a success, not that I've made a lot of money doing it, yet that my kids or somebody else has come along and taken the control of this and continued this legacy that we're creating today. That mentality seems to be a shift towards that stewardship mentality.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the other benefit of stewardship is it actually makes life so much easier. I was working with a family office, and they had just recently sold a business, had a really great brand name recognition, like you would know it if you heard it. And so we were talking about understanding this why and getting clarity. And ultimately, they said they want to be known for three things. They want to be known for loyalty with themselves and others. They wanted to be known for integrity in all they do. And they wanted to be defined by excellence. Now, unfortunately, the acronym for that was LIE. So
yeah, I was doing it in my head as you were saying it.
I know, exactly. We got to put it in a different order. But it was interesting because that afternoon, they were talking about a business deal that they were thinking about doing. And they had spent months looking at this. And it was a project that was going to make them some good money. And it could cash flow right away, but it was kind of geographically remote. It was going to take a lot of work and effort to kind of go and manage this. And so they were kind of hemming and hawing, trying to decide what to do with this investment. And so I asked them, I said, let me ask you this. Can you do this investment with excellence? And they said, done. We're not doing the deal. They said, because, yeah, we could go make some money, but ultimately we can't do it with the excellence that we want to be known for. And it would ultimately affect long-term our brand. And so once they knew their why and they had clarity on their why, and that excellence is bigger than themselves, then it actually made the decision-making on what to do with this so much easier.
David, let me put you on the spot. You've mentioned clarity on the why in many different terms multiple times already in our conversation. I personally believe that a lot of people are incredibly intimidated by that term. Uh, because it just means so much more. And they just come up with phony answers, or, they'll say, well, my family's my why. Yet it really
Yeah.
doesn't mean anything, right? It's like, okay, so your family's your why, yet you're sitting on your butt over there. You could be doing something with your family or about your family. I don't think a lot of people really get it. Talk to us. How do you, and I love this. This is coming from a lawyer slash CPA, right? This is a guy who's as analytical, I've got to believe, when you're working in tax and estate planning and CPA mindset and all that stuff. How do you explain the why? Or do you just only seem to be working with clients that already have that in place?
No, it's such a good question, and it's so funny because especially at business, it's easy. Like we're all about clarity of what is our purpose, what's our mindset, what's our 60-second elevator speech for who we are and why we run this business, right? And then we go home and it's the tyranny of the urgent, right? We taking kids to practice, got to do homework, got to go to the grocery store, and we lack that intentionality in life that we apply in other areas. And so, again, and I've seen all different kinds of clients, but the ones who I've found to be the most grounded, centered, and impactful, they knew their why. They could tell you the elevator speech for themselves. They knew who they were, what they valued, and what they believed. And I agree with you. Yeah, let's not go with the cheesy. Oh, my why is my family. Like, no, it's not. It can be a motivation, and love is a great motivation. But you need to be really clear in what you do and why you do it. And that's why I think it starts with questions. And I think so much of the world today, we live in that information age, right? We think, oh, I just need some more information. No, what you need is transformation. And transformation occurs through questions and stories. And I think data and information inform, questions and stories transform. And so part of the book is I just collected a whole bunch of questions from different people over time to ask yourself. And I give you just one example. If I were to say to you, Chad, what are if you could be known for three things,
Yep.
What would you want to be known for? If you can answer that question, you're a long way along the road of understanding your why.
Okay. So audience, pause, right? Pause or make a note and come back to this, however you want. Just answer that question that David just asked right there. What are those three things that you want to be known for, right? When it comes to it, because you're going to probably get a little bit closer to figuring out this why thing. That's a great question for people, especially if they want to end up with creating some sort of legacy, having stewardship of something, not just ownership, is knowing what I want to be known for when I'm gone. So what kind of thing do I need to create now? Give me some people. I mean, we all know. I mean, I got to guess. I'm completely guessing that if someone to say to me, Chad, name a steward, right? George Washington is who's coming to my mind as a lot of the things you're talking about here today, because he didn't come in to say, well, I'm going to be the president and it's about me to run this country. It was, I'm going to help create this country that's going to live long beyond me and become this wonderful country. Give me some examples, though, of some stewards that maybe in your research you came up that, you were looking at somebody and you said, yeah, here's a great example that everybody knows who this person is.
Yeah, so I can't believe you haven't read the book because I start with George Washington. So it's really fascinating because in throughout almost all of human history and even today, it's not a question of right. It's not a question of what's my why in life. It was a question of power, right? You either had power or you didn't. And when George Washington went back to the Continental Congress and when he stepped down as general of the army, when King George heard about that, he said, if that is true, then George Washington is the greatest man who's ever lived. And it's because he realized, why in the world, if you had all that power, George Washington had the army, he could have taken over and been the king of America. But that wasn't what he was about. That wasn't his why. His why was about democracy. It was about freedom, and he was looking beyond himself. And so he's a classic example of a steward. I'll give you another one. Nelson Mandela. One of the things that people don't realize, or I didn't know until I started looking into his life, did you know he was actually offered his freedom 6 times? 6 times they came to him and offered him freedom. And he went through just horrific treatment for years and years, had no idea that the world was slowly rallying around him. But every time they offered him freedom, it was conditional. So you either had to leave public life or you had to leave South Africa. You couldn't speak out against the government. And his transcendence was freedom. And what he realized was partial freedom is still a form of subjugation, and that you're not truly free until you're fully free. So 48 hours at that place, I would have probably, agreed to anything. He was there for years because he was a steward. He was all in. No one could question that. But it was about something bigger than himself. Because if it had been about himself, he would have walked out. So he's another example. And I go through other examples in the book.
That's awesome. Okay, so we got some great examples in the book. I want to shift gears just a little bit, and folks, stick with us all the way to the end. I've got some questions I've been jotting down while David and I are talking. We're going to do a massive 180 at one, maybe more of a 90 degree here. We're just going to shoot off to left field all of a sudden, because I know what our audience might want to know as well. This is amazing. Now, you've mentioned the book. I haven't read the book. I got to even ask, what's the title of the book, and how is everybody going to be able to get their hands on the book if they want to read more about stewardship and what you've got for us?
Yeah, so it's called The Gift of Lift, and the subtitle is Harnessing the Power of Stewardship to Elevate the World. And honestly, I've been working on this book for years. The hardest part for me was the title, coming up with the title of it. But sure. I actually did, I have a son who's interested in aeronautical engineering. And so we went up to Seattle to the Air Museum that they have up there. And one of the fascinating things that I didn't know is that engineers aren't actually entirely sure why and how planes fly, right? You remember all back to high school, we think about the Bernoulli principle, right? And how there's low pressure over the top of the plane, the wing, and that's what causes it to lift. But the reality is, if a plane goes upside down, it still flies. It doesn't go down, right? So it actually goes against that. So then they thought, well, maybe it's Newton's second law. It's because the wing is angled down, it's pushing air down, so it causes the plane to go up. But that doesn't actually explain the low pressure on the top of the wing. So what's interesting is when you combine forward thrust with outstretched arms, in other words, you're fully invested and you're about more than yourself, that's when you experience this gift of lift. And it's a magical thing when you combine those two together. But that's what it's called, The Gift of Lift. It's out June 6th. It'll be on Amazon, Kindle, Audible, all of those.
The traditional places.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And I don't know when our episode's going to go, folks. That book might already be available, or it might still be just a little bit before the book is coming. Make sure you check in the show notes. We'll either have a link to it, or you can go to Amazon. The Gift of Lift. And I think, David, you've now just made me a little more nervous about the next time I get on an airplane, because they're not really sure why we're going where we're going.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Yeah, you're like, oh, wait a second. Yeah.
All right, you mentioned that your son was involved. That might answer my next question, which again has nothing to do with anything. When we record these, folks, as Bob and I have told you before, we have videos, so we can see, David and I can see each other right now. You got a rocket ship behind you.
Yeah, it's actually.
What is that representing that you've just got sitting there on your desk behind you? It looks like a giant Lego rocket ship.
Yeah, actually, that's my same son is in aerospace. He loves Lego, so he built a 2,000 piece Apollo rocket. Part of that is when I was 4 years old, I actually saw the Apollo Soyuz rocket take off. So it was on my birthday. Now, at the time, my family had told me they scheduled it for my birthday. As I'm looking back now, I think there were other forces that might have been at play. But amazing to see. Same thing. Again, that was the whole space movement, was this vision that Kennedy laid out in the early 1960s. And when he said that, we had not even orbited the Earth once. And he sent this, hey, we're going to be at the moon. And so part of especially after his assassination, there was just this rally, let's achieve that. So it was about something bigger than themselves, and they accomplished something just remarkable at the time.
Yeah, that's an interesting way that it then ties back into your stewardship conversation right there, as I'm sure almost every conversation with you would. All right, I want to go 90 degrees. I just want, we're going to completely change subject, folks. I'm usually really good at segues, right? Bob will say, how'd you get us from here to there all of a sudden as we're talking on the podcast? It's something I just somehow make work. This one, I got no segue. I got no segue whatsoever, David. You are an estate planner. You're a CPA. Our people want to make more money.
Yeah.
Our people want to make more wealth. They don't just want money and cash and assets that are consumerism. They want to make more wealth. They want to be able to leave that wealth to others and to start talking to our audience now on a completely different subject. If you were going to advise somebody what they could do in their life right now with your estate knowledge, with your CPA knowledge for maybe some tax advantages they should be looking at, maybe some future planning they should be looking at, give me some free advice to share with our audience filled with entrepreneurs right now on what they should be doing money-wise.
Yeah, a great question. So, I call the traditional model of estate planning the 4D model: dump, divide, defer, and dissipate, right? Like that's what 95% of estate planning says. Let's dump the money down to the next generation. Let's divide it up equally among the kids. Let's defer any taxes, and let's dissipate the wealth. It's a pretty uncompelling model, quite frankly, and it leads to that consumerism. So the first thing I would say is cast a vision for your wealth and its purpose. What do you want your wealth to do? And too often we just want our wealth to be and not to do, right? So what do you want your wealth to do? And then the other thing I would say is to avoid that consumerism, really focus on opportunity transfer as opposed to wealth transfer. It's interesting. If you go back for thousands of years, wealth transfer, what was the quintessential form of wealth? What was the very top thing in wealth? It was land. Right? If you had the opportunity to transfer the land to the next generation, but at the end of the day, what is land? It's a transfer of an opportunity, right? That next generation still has to work that land, defend the land, protect it, bring in the crops, right? And so it actually took cost and work and effort on the part of that next generation. And yet cost and work and effort is what actually brings the value. In 25 years of doing estate planning, if I've learned one thing, it's this: we value things based on what they cost us, right? And when something doesn't cost you anything, you just can't value it like something that comes with cost. And it's the paradox of wealth. So many of my clients earn their wealth through hard work, risk, stress, sleepless nights, worry, right? And as a result, they highly value that wealth. What does wealth help you to avoid? Hard work, risk, stress, sleepless nights, right? And if we're not careful, the very thing that we use to create and to value our wealth is what we actually undercut in that next generation. And so a lot of my clients, what we focus on instead is opportunity transfer. I had a client once who he had a really successful business. He was looking to transition it to the next generation. He had a son who had worked in the business for several years. He went out and appraised the business and then sold it to his son for full fair market value. And so he then retired to someplace nice and warm, and his son was sending him checks for a couple of years. And then his son called him one day and said, "Hey, I'd love for you to come up to dinner. Will you fly up?" And he said, "Sure, I'll come up." So he came up and they went out to dinner. And with tears in his eyes, the son handed his dad an advance check for the remaining amount of the business.
Wow.
And he said, "Thank you for believing in me. And thank you for having this cost me, because I value this so much." And I think we have to be really careful in how we transfer wealth. And so if we have a vision for that wealth, and if we focus on opportunities, I think you can break that cycle of that consumption mentality. So that's what we do with a lot of our clients, is help them realize how can we help that next generation be fully invested themselves, so that they can bring that level of value and appreciation to it.
I love that. Now, is there something we should be doing immediately, though, that's going to give me benefits? Put your CPA hat on right now. What's the one thing that's going to give me these immediate tax benefits that might or might not come in the future that most people aren't doing? We've given a few loopholes and a few of the games for them to play, but Give me that one piece.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of strategies because, again, structure and strategies are really important too. And I'll give you a couple of things. One, on your CPA, I'll tell you this. I find CPAs fall into two categories. The first are historians. You give them your information in February or March. They tell you how much you owe in April, right? The second are the proactive ones. They're the ones that are meeting with you in October, November. They're telling you what you're going to owe. They're telling you what changes you can make and things you can do. That's the kind you want.
So there's step one, right? Find the CPA that wants to talk to you in October, not the one that wants all your paperwork turned in at the beginning of March.
Exactly. At that point, they're just historians and they're bringing you no value at all.
Okay.
Second, I'll say this. Taxes, to me, it's like a flight from LA to New York. I bet if you got on a flight and you asked everyone how much they paid, you're probably going to get different numbers. You might not find two people on that plane who paid the same amount, right? Because some booked it early. They were a different class. I've still never understood all those classes on planes. Some used their Sky Miles. Some paid first class. Some showed up that day. They all accomplished the same thing, right? They went from LA to New York.
Okay.
Taxes are like that. And the reality is how you structure, how you pay, how you acquire things, your entity itself has a large bearing on how much you end up paying in taxes. And again, so many clients, they're working with a historian. They're not questioning how they're doing, what they're doing, and how they've structured things, and they're paying dramatically more in taxes because of that lack of effort. And taxes are a huge drag on the success of any business.
Okay, folks, you had two podcasts in one right here, right? We're going to talk stewardship. We're going to talk about the gift of lift with David York as he's talking to us about how to change our mindset to become that steward of something, not just an owner, or maybe that asset owns us. And we're going to shift gears, and then we're going to talk to you about your money, right? How to plan for the future, how to help your next generation, how to create opportunity, not just give them something to go buy, and then maybe how to make sure that you're doing the best you can with your taxes. Because here at Win, Make, Give, one of our favorite things to talk about is wealth. Not only that, it's health, leadership, and legacy. So here we are. We're talking to you about wealth, leadership, legacy, right in one podcast. David, if you could give me a health tip, you would hit all four of the magic pinnacle of Win, Make, Give. You got anything for everybody in the world of health?
Yeah, actually, I love your 15 points. That was such a great practical information. And one of those is sleep. I'll just focus on that one because, again, from a steward mentality, when you're about something bigger than yourself, it actually takes a lot of pressure off. And you're just about advancing the ball. So many people put so much pressure on themselves and they cut into that sleep and affects everything else that they do. And so again, when you can knock down your list to those three things of who you are, actually really freeing, and it actually can allow you to enjoy the journey a lot more.
Folks, you came to the Win, Make, Give podcast where we talk about health, wealth, leadership, and legacy. And today we literally talked about health, wealth, leadership, and legacy with author, lawyer, CPA, and all-around good guy, David York. David, thank you so much for joining us. If our audience wanted to follow up with you, wanted to reach out to you, wanted to connect with you, obviously they're going to get their hands on the book by going to Amazon and checking out The Gift of Lift. Yet your website, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you after this episode if they want to know more?
Yeah, if you go to davidryork.com, it's got information, articles. I've also got a TED Talk I did on there on wealth, what wealth really is. So it's about 11 minutes. It's funny, preparing for that, someone told me, if you want me to speak for an hour, give me a week or two notice. If you want me to speak for 10 minutes, give me 4 months. And that was really true, for that really getting down to the essence. But you can check that out too. I think it's actually, again, about a different mindset when it comes to wealth.
All right. So check out davidryork.com. Check out The Gift of Lift. Folks, come join us in our Facebook group, Win, Make, Give, where we talk about these episodes, our takeaways, and so much more after their drop. So make sure you're a part of our Facebook group so we can continue the conversation there. And as always, we hope you'll share this episode with someone that needs to hear it. That there's somebody who will take value away from it. David, on behalf of Ben, Bob, myself, we want to thank you for taking the time joining us today. And audience, as always, do good,